Hello everybody, here we are again with the Literary Ants, and today we're going to finish our schematic summary of the 30 Years' War. So let's go back to the conflict. First of all though, you can see what Germany looks like today, the centre of Europe looks like today, just to give you a reference point.
Well, it's curious how the fronts during the 30 Years' War sometimes overlapped.
Yes, it wasn't a very straightforward thing at all. There were many things were overlapping in effect.
In the background we have the Holy Roman Empire,
which is a bit of a confusing expression. It wasn't in Rome, but the emperor, who was the head of the Holy Roman Empire, was invested in Rome from the Pope, who was not an uninterested person. He was up to politics to here.
He was not only a religious character, he was above all a political character.
Exactly.
And the Holy Roman Empire actually was a big, complicated political entity, and it was made up of several smaller and bigger territories, and it worked more or less like this. On an international level they were all together, but on a local level everybody had their own independence. And this big empire during the war, during the 30 Years' War, was actually split into two parts. Catholics, of course, on the one side, who were supported by the Papal State and Spain, and on the other side, the Protestants were supported by France.
Catholic country.
A Catholic country. That's the reason why we keep on telling you that economics has always been a big issue. It still is, of course. And then among the Protestant front there was also Sweden, for example,
which was a very important country at that time.
Well organized because it was led by very sage ministers and kings with very long-sighted views, and they were the protagonists of the European history.
Physically it wasn't limited to the area where it is now. A lot of borders have changed over the years, and this is something that I've learned in history.
Yeah, and then on the Protestant side we also had Denmark and Holland. Oh, and now there were in the end no soldiers, no armies as we...
No uniforms?
No.
Oh.
Most soldiers were mercenaries.
Mercenaries?
They got paid, and then they grabbed everything they could on their way during the war. They destroyed, they raped, tortured. As spoils of war, they even got girls. This girl was an object, and sometimes they even got married. So you have really an idea of the atrocities and the violence which were going on at that time, and the mentality was completely different.
Yes, and they took their they also brought families, those who were married, they took their wives and children along with them, and the soldier's fortune was the family's fortune, so whatever the soldier got, the family got. And then the wives would look after the men, they would, if they were wounded, they would look after them. And then the children grew up in this atmosphere. I mean, it's a very strange concept for us today.
It could happen, for example, that one day you will be fighting with the Protestants, but if you were made prisoner by the Catholics, the next day you will be fighting with the Catholics. And so it was just a matter of survival.
You go wherever you're forced to fight or where the money is. Absolutely. You weren't going to escape. If your army had been destroyed, you would just join the other army because that was your job.
Yes.
So these were the soldiers, but there were, behind these people, who else was there?
Some éminence grise. But we have this Albrecht von Wallenstein, a nobleman coming from Bohemian nobility, and he was a mercenary. He was a very brilliant man. And then his friend, banker Hans de Witt, Dutch Calvinist. Well, for the record, Calvinists are another part of Protestants.
And the Calvinists were the ones who believed, and still believe, that God gives you money if you're good, and if you're poor, you're obviously bad. And this idea is behind a lot of North American mentality.
But these two characters were very, very interesting. I mean, you have this Wallenstein, who was a soldier, and then on the other side we have De Witt, who gathers money for his friend. Who was De Witt? He was a reliable person, very well known on the European financial market, so he could find many people who gave him money for weapons, for paying these soldiers, mercenaries, and so on. A person who arranged a crazy war on credits.
That sounds familiar these days, doesn't it?
Well, his project was based above all on speculation. So he promised territories to the people who had given him money, territories who were not conquered yet. And that was the beginning of the end, because this system worked very well at the beginning. So Wallenstein could get a lot of money from this Hans de Witt, but since the territories, the conquered or unconquered territories, didn't produce the wealth that they expected and that the creditors expected,
some people got into a lot of trouble. So Wittgenstein, Wittgenstein, another one, he's a philosopher, was very, very rich, very, very influential. Everybody knew him, but he got too powerful for his own good.
Why was he chosen?
He was just a minor noble.
He was a strategist, and the emperor at that time, Ferdinand II of Habsburg, was broke. So he needed someone who had the money or could find it, and Wallenstein was the one.
Yes.
So the emperor made him the general of the imperial army, and at the beginning Wallenstein was very successful. But then what happened? The church and then the nobles started telling the emperor that this Wallenstein was a traitor, he was not as reliable as he thought, and that he aimed to be the most powerful man of the empire. Well, the emperor got scared, and so he let Wallenstein
be killed.
Yeah.
Yes. Rid me of this man. Sounds like Beckett, doesn't it?
De Witt, the banker, didn't end up well. Either. He committed suicide because he got desperate because he was hounded by his creditors, and he couldn't give them back their money, and so he drowned himself into a fountain.
Oh, well, yes, if you fly high, you fall further. But these are two of the very, very interesting characters in the 30 Years' War. And how long were they actually operative, these two?
Well, not that long, actually, because De Witt died in September 1630, and Wallenstein was killed in January, February 1634. So not that long.
And the war still continued until 1648. So they were major characters in the middle of the war. So
the last point.
The last point. Only one more thing to talk about on this brief introduction, and it's how information got around.
Two things which were deeply connected one with each other, and it was the post and the
newspapers. Yes.
During the 30 Years' War, we have the first newspapers. They were not newspapers as we know them today, but the curious thing was that people wanted to know what was going on all around. And this information was connected with the circulation of the past.
Of course.
Because there was one route going from Brussels to Rome, and it was very well organized, because in comparison to the old mail service, there were messengers who rode between 20 and 50 kilometers a day, always with a fresh horse from a town to another, and with the letters, they brought also news. They had notes or things like that, for example. And it could happen that people living in the Holy Roman Empire got news about the 30 Years' War coming from Venice. This is what happened.
Yes. That's very, very surprising. This is why the people knew that it was happening all over the place, all the time, and so this was how this reinforced the idea that they had that it was a continuous war. Yes.
Another question is, was the 30 Years' War then a media war? Since it was based somehow on news circulating from all over Europe.
The first media war.
On purpose, we've just left out the peace treaty, because it will be the first part of our next video.
And we'll see you then. Hope you find this interesting. Bye.
Ciao.